Time flies. Students once shunned him, death penalty opponents treat him like poison, and his ex-wife forbids their son answering his calls. With few loyal friends left, he drank heavily that night, chatting with Xiaomai. Suddenly, she fell to the floor, acting like a rainbow fart. David quickly rushed her to the hospital. Xiaomai had been battling leukemia, never telling David. Back in reality, David was a hot mess in prison. Maybe that's why Xiaomai opposed the death penalty. She fought for others' right to live as she lost her own hope. Xiaomai dreamed of a better world. What a sweetheart. The next day, after the interview was over, it seemed like Bessie was smitten with the intern journalist Van Clues. David could have had a reduced sentence, botched by his attorney. Rumor said a top lawyer wanted to defend him, but David trusted his buddy. The TV station's hefty $500,000 interview fee was in, and tomorrow they had to hand it over to the lawyer. Just as they were ready to call it a night, they both thought, let's just hit the hay. Bessie spotted his door ajar, with the tape hanging in his room. After a brief panic, her brain clicked in. This must be related to the case, so he dragged his assistant to turn on the TV. What they saw was scarier than a horror movie, the crime scene of cons being murdered. Watching a naked person on the floor struggling for their life was a visual shocker. Both of them were shaken to their cores. After the footage, Bessie dropped his tough act, sobbing on his assistant's shoulder. He felt an unprecedented mix of panic and helplessness, struck by the bittersweet passage of life. After that shocking night, doubts about the case only intensified. A pried open door in the middle of the night, a mysterious tape, and the recurring pickup truck in the investigation all filled the assistant's mind with questions. David wasn't dead yet, and the killer just casually released the tape. How ridiculous. Bessie had his own take on it. To destroy someone fully, just destroying their body isn't enough. Their psyche must be crushed. The tape was Kant's decryption key. The killer wanted David to know freedom's evidence was out, but execution day neared. Too late even with the tape. The killer tried to crush him with despair. After leaving the restaurant, Bessie hurriedly sought David's lawyer for a reduced sentence. But the lawyer simply shook his head in defeat. There was no second person in the video, meaning it basically proved nothing. That house became a hotspot. Anyone could film there. Seeing the lawyer's laid-back attitude, Bessie felt sympathy for David. If David had hired a competent lawyer, he might have had hope. Deep in thought, Bessie forgot her coat and turned back. But she found the pickup driver who had been tailing her was also waiting there. How suspicious. She immediately found her assistant and told him to track that man in the cowboy hat and figure out who he was. There were only 2 cars on this road. The cowboy wasn't a fool either. He quickly sensed something was off and managed to shake off the assistant who was trailing him. Meanwhile, Bessie took a cab to the prison for his final interview. This conversation was critical. Bessie got straight to the point. Who was that cowboy? David replied, that's the zealous follower of cons I mentioned before. His name was Dathaz. He was present during the trial and provided testimony against David. Yet David firmly believed that the whole matter traced its origins back 6 years ago. Back then, Cons, diagnosed with leukemia, health declining, still shouted against the death penalty. He believed black death row inmates outnumbered whites, raising doubts about police fairness, with some wrongfully imprisoned. Some ended up in this mess due to family backgrounds or societal pressures, not because they were truly wicked, much like the black girl he was trying to help. Facing heavy charges, she was in trouble. Cons decided to help, but it didn't go as planned. She ultimately flopped. This left Cons in despair and self-doubt. Leukemia patients shouldn't be getting all worked up. This blow completely wrecked Cons' health. That night, David visited his best bud, listening to all his life complaints. He had sacrificed so much for his ideals. Marriage, family, romance, even the basic needs were hard to meet. At that moment, David offered to help, making up for lost chances with care and gentleness, while Cons sobbed uncontrollably. This didn't seem like enjoyment anymore, it felt like a ritual. Meanwhile, a pickup truck quietly waited just outside the window. The next day, David stepped out and Dathaz walked in. No one knew what happened, only that David was arrested that night. Charge? Rape and murder of a teacher, with DNA as the strongest evidence. At this, Bessie whipped his head up and thought, the killer must be Dathaz. Killing for love and framing a rival. Now that the motive was clear, if they could just find the full tape, they might save David. Meanwhile, Bessie started blaming the guy in front of him. Why didn't you call me sooner? There's less than 24 hours left before the execution. We're out of time. But David remained calm, telling him to take his time. Because what mattered to him was his image in his son's eyes. Other than that, he didn't care much for this world anymore. In thoughts outshined his eyes, reality triumphs over dreams, and losses are irreversible. Death becomes a blessing, freeing you from pain. As David handed his hands over to the police, the 3-day interview period came to an end. Bess's expression was one of deep agony because he knew David was wrongfully accused. He could do nothing but watch the tragedy unfold. Bessie was so troubled that he couldn't sleep and got up to watch the tape, where he ended up uncovering some clues. The next morning, Bessie and her assistant went to the crime scene, paying the landlord $100 to recreate the scene and return everything to its original. Bessie directed the actors while signaling her assistant to watch the upcoming footage. On screen, Kunt's left leg twitched, then it was a solid 15 seconds of stillness. It wasn't until the oxygen in the plastic bag ran dry that he began to twist uncontrollably. Obviously, this didn't make sense, because if it were murder, the victim would be screaming in terror as soon as the hood went on, only stopping when they were dead. Yet in the video, Combs appeared remarkably calm, not attempting to break free at all. To validate this logic, Bessie decided to conduct a lab experiment. He instructed his assistant to time him for 3 minutes, and no matter how he struggled, they couldn't stop.